We should all be thankful for Camilla. Greetings from Royal Family Lud, my channel. The innate charisma of Her Majesty won over a previously skeptical populace to secure this historic day. Today there will be two crownings. The second is the person who was born Camilla Shand and later went by the names Mrs. Camilla Parker Bowles and Duchess of Cornwall. The Archbishop of Canterbury will formally enthrone her as Her Majesty Queen Camilla, Queen Consort of King Charles IIe at the coronation ceremony. It will be the first time since Catherine Parr, the sixth and final wife of Henry VIII, became queen in 1543 that the monarchy has been held by a woman whose father was neither a member of the royal family nor a British or European noble. Thank you. Please subscribe to my channel. Since Queen Catherine had been twice married and twice widowed before becoming the sovereign's wife and had a religious outlook that she found sympathetic, Queen Camilla claimed 10 years ago that she felt a kinship with the monarch. It was unclear at the moment if Queen Camilla would ever hold that position. It seems that she and Queen Catherine are connected by something even more significant now. The formal acknowledgement of Queen Camilla today is the most recent step in a protracted process that the British public, and, in fact, the rest of the globe, have perhaps grown too accustomed to. Before she wed Andrew Parker Bowles, a career soldier who retired in the rank of brigadier in 1973, she had a strong relationship with the king. The fact that at the time it was thought she would not be a good wife for the Prince of Wales is a reminder of how far the royal family and those who advise it have come in the last 50 years. Her mother had a baron as a grandpa and an earl as a great-great-grandfather. Therefore, she naturally claimed genealogy from Charles II through her gentry and aristocratic lineage. She had the typical background of a queen consort. Although it was rumored that the king's mentor, the notoriously dynastically ambitious Earl Mountbatten of Burma, wanted him to marry his granddaughter Amanda Knatchbull, the king's beloved grandmother, Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, was adamant that he marry one of the daughters of Earl Spencer, granddaughters of her close friend Ruth, Lady Fermoy, as she was determined that he marry one of the daughters of Earl Spencer. Even though the two young people were, according to their circle of friends, so plainly matched, it appears that both of these elders contributed to scuttling any chance for the then Prince of Wales to marry the then Miss Shand. In order to keep the prince away from this prospective bride, Mountbatten is said to have helped arrange for the prince to be posted to the Royal Navy. The couple's on-off relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles resumed and ended in marriage, allegedly as a result of the couple's parents publishing an engagement announcement in the Times without their knowledge, which forced L.T. Parker Bowles, as he was then, to propose to the woman. In addition, the majority of purported experts who have written about the king and queen suggest that courtiers at the time thought she was the wrong kind of woman for him to wed. This was likely due in part to Mountbatten and Queen Elizabeth's influence, as well as the fact that she did not fit the demure, reticent, blushing aristocratic stereotype they had in mind for the future king, a stereotype that the teenage Lady Diana Spencer would appear to fit so well, albeit with disastrous results. According to general agreement, the late Queen would have been strongly advised to decline the Prince of Wales' request to marry Miss Shand in 1972 or thereabouts because he was only 23 or 24 years old. As a result, the trajectory of royal history changed drastically. The Prince and Mrs. Parker Bowles' friendship was revived before he wed Lady Diana and lasted after the wedding in July 1981. According to reports, Andrew Parker Bowles, who had extramarital affairs himself, made no protests, and the pair did not get divorced until 1995, years after the prince's affair with Mrs. Parker Bowles was made public. The Princess of Wales was essentially forced into an undesirable marriage by her and her husband's grandparents. The situation quickly grew unpleasant and gave rise to her famous statement that her marriage consisted of 3 people in a now discredited interview with Panorama. After their wedding, the couple's long and painful spiral toward divorce began, and it would take guts for any outsider to attempt to assign blame or assert that they are aware of the true factors for the marriage to fail at this distance. However, blame was assigned. The Prince of Wales was scorned and demonized as evidence of his relationship with Mrs. Parker Bowles surfaced. Prior to that, he had been mostly ignored as he fell farther into the shadow of his gorgeous and rising in popularity wife. The Camillagate tapes became well known after someone listened in on a phone call between the prince and his mistress, which was sold to the tabloid press and later gained notoriety as the Diana, her true story briefing that the princess gave Andrew Morton in secret. Mrs. Parker Bowles was then referred to as the most hated woman in Britain by one publication. The segment of the public that delights in other people's scandals and tragedies gorged themselves on the tale. The Wallaces separated, and the prince acknowledged that he and Mrs. Parker Bowles remained very good friends in an ill-advised interview with Jonathan Dimbleby. Public sentiment was strongly in Diana, Princess of Wales' favor because it was widely believed that she had been wronged. Nonetheless, things soon took a tragic turn for the worst. Her passing in an automobile accident in Paris in August 1997 marked a turning point not just in the life of the couple who would now be crowned king and queen, but also in how the general public saw the royal family. Mrs. Parker Bowles, who exercised her right to choose another man, kept a low profile for many months. The Prince of Wales, who had no such option, was put in the appalling position of a divorced husband who was blamed for the death of an ex-wife hundreds of miles away in a foreign country. Before the general public's opinion began to change and reason began to prevail, it took some time. The princess had unfortunately passed away after her divorce, not as a direct result of it, but as a result of decisions she had taken intentionally regarding her personal life. Some people needed years to come to terms with that, and it wasn't until they did that a similarly logical assessment of Mrs. Parker Bowles' role in the life of the future king could be made. The couple wasn't first spotted together in public until 2 years after the Paris attacks and the ensuing national uproar. From there, such sightings grew steadily more frequent. The public eventually grew weary of the persecution of a woman whose status as a villainess had been horribly overstated, which contributed to the occasionally frenzied behavior of the tabloid press, whose moral outrage was concocted in the interests of circulation. People began to realize that what had occurred in the Wallaces' marriage was not dissimilar from what occurs in tens of thousands of other marriages every year, including those newspaper editors and royal experts whose own private lives had not always been exactly regular. The Victorian constitutionalist Walter Baytot discussed the advantages of having a family on the throne, and his prescriptive writings on the nature of monarchy still hold true today, some 160 years after he first laid them out in the English Constitution. He believed that made it simpler for the populace, who were primarily family members, to understand how they were ruled. Families experience problems from time to time, unfortunately, fairly frequently in today's society. It is not immediately obvious why this should be any different for those who would one day become the king and queen, because they are merely human like all other family members. Eventually, the majority of the British public would realize and agree that the King and Queen Camilla's situation was just that. They had the unfortunate misfortune that the drama, which was usually private, was played out in public. The British public has warmed up to the Queen and is approaching her coronation today, not just with goodwill, but with enthusiasm, thanks in large part to the stoicism, patience, restraint, and good humor with which she endured the abhorrent attack on her by the tabloid press in the early 2000s. But it has been a slow, arduous process. Thanks to the public relations prowess of Mark Bolland, a former member of the prince's household who had an innate knowledge of the pace at which public attitudes were changing, she was greatly rehabilitated before she married the Prince of Wales in 2005. However, even at the time of her second marriage, it was still not considered, or at least publicly acknowledged, that she might ever be proclaimed queen. In fact, some tabloid editors were surprised by the lack of popular indignation, as they themselves lagged behind those larger perceptions. It was decided the bride would not adopt the title of Princess of Wales, despite being legally entitled to it, despite Diana, Princess of Wales, having been dead for almost 8 years at the time of the wedding. According to English law, if her husband's position is higher than her own, she must always accept it. It was believed that there was simply too much pro-Diana feeling still present in the public's mind for that to be prudent, and that doing so would run the risk of ruining a significant portion of the effective rehabilitation work Mr. Bolland had planned. Due to one of her husband's subsidiary peerages, she also acquired the title of Duchess of Cornwall after their marriage. Those who knew the Duchess anticipated what would occur next. The happy marriage she should have had with the Prince of Wales finally materialized. Her influence on him made him more relaxed and a better communicator than he had ever been. The exercise of her natural gifts of charm, wit, geniality, and sincerity on public appearances and sporadic media appearances gradually transformed Britain's perception of her and caused the public to value her highly. In a piece I wrote about 10 years ago, I argued that it was finally time to stop calling her the Princess of Wales in order to stop insulting her and her husband. It drew a sizable amount of negative mail that berated me for my knavery and idiocy and made fun of the Duchess's alleged role in the dissolution of her husband's previous marriage, which we now know failed for a number of other reasons as well. The late Queen then expressed her desire for her to succeed her as monarch on the 70th anniversary of her accession after realizing the enormous contribution her daughter-in-law had made to the nation. Given the impact Her Majesty's devotion to the royal family and the nation has had on a once skeptical population, it is unlikely that there will be much hostility when she is crowned today as a result. The road to Queen Camilla's big moment in Westminster Abbey hasn't been smooth. She has displayed the highest levels of resiliency, perseverance, and fortitude in the face of hardship and unwarranted criticism. Above all, she has consistently displayed the respect required of a senior member of the royal family, a lesson her younger stepson, the Duke of Sussex, would benefit from understanding. She will continue to serve the crown and our nation with the utmost devotion for as long as she is able, and she will be a steadfast support to her husband the king. Her qualities would have been apparent to Queen Catherine. We should all be aware of the strength of the sentiment when the choir sings the Latin phrase vivets, long life, in her honor during the ritual. The fact that our king has such a wife and queen makes today a bathing great day for the person born Camilla Shand, as well as for our nation.